like the more diverse your writing, the more likely it is you'll be able to put out more books.
Hi, this is You May Contribute a Verse. I'm Brenna Jeanneret, author of newly released The Law of Birthdays, illustrated by Maria Condra from Cardinal Rule Press. I'm joined by my co-host Josh Monken, dad, kidlit author, and science communicator, and podcast wizard Jon Seymour, author-illustrator of A Morning with Blueberry. And that was our guest, Laura Gehl. We chat about being prolific, how she gets her good news, and using neuroscience in picture books. Here's Laura's verse.
No, we were just talking about like the benefit of having like smaller chunks of time to work with and the deadline that creates. And I was like, Josh would 100% like be on board with that, like being more productive with like a smaller frame of time.
It can be so artificial. Just yesterday, I had to set myself multiple 30-minute windows to get my work done because I was struggling with some focus yesterday.
Well, I was saying that for me, I often think of my critique group meetings, and I'm in a few different groups, but the meetings are like deadlines because I don't want to show up empty-handed because that just feels like a missed opportunity to get this brain trust to weigh in.
Totally. So Laura, that's a great segue because the main thing I want to talk to you about is like how prolific you are. Like I want to be Laura Gehl when I like arrive in my career. Like you are so prolific and you write across so many genres. Like I'm so impressed with like what you're able to put out. And like the early reader you sent us is adorable. We have several at my house. My kid is 6. He loves them. Like they're so cute. So I guess my segue question is, how many critique groups are you in, and are they specific to like different genres?
So I'm in one online or virtual critique group, and that one is just picture books. And then the other ones are across genres. One is in person and one is over Zoom.
Okay.
But what you just said about writing for different ages, I think that is a big part of being able to be prolific because there is just a limit for even the most brilliant, awesome writer to how many picture books, for example, you could possibly put out. But if you're writing board books and early readers and picture books and middle grade, then, and you know, not in my case, but some people, YA and graphic novels, you're just able to put out more books. So it doesn't work for everyone, but it works well for me. That's kind of how my brain works in a lot of different directions.
There's a dichotomy or two sides to that. It's like one, you're able to write in those different genres more prolifically, but then also there's fit for market too, I suppose. Like there's only so many Laura Gehl picture books that could possibly or feasibly hit the market in any given year. Is there an intentionality
exactly. You're not
there too? Yeah.
100%, because you don't want to be competing against yourself, and your publisher definitely doesn't want you to be competing against yourself. So yeah, if you're writing for different markets, then the competition aspect isn't there. And I also write, in prose and in rhyme, and I write secular books and Jewish books, and I write science-y books and just straight up fiction books. And some of the science-y books are actual nonfiction and some of them are fiction with a science element. So again, like the more diverse your writing, the more likely it is you'll be able to put out more books. And again, that's not for everyone. I know amazing writers who have one style or brand and they stick to it, and they have these incredible careers where you really know what you're getting when you get one of their books. And sometimes I worry that a reader who fell in love with one of my books and then gets a different book, they could be getting something so different and they may be disappointed. Hopefully they actually are excited to go in this different direction that I went, but you never really can count on that.
Yeah, no, totally. And I want to just mention Donut, because that's one of my favorite books of yours. I love that book.
Oh, thank you. I love it too.
It's so cute and so kind of like quirky and like sparse text. Like there's what, like 25 words in that book or something, but it's so cute. I don't know if you know that book, Josh. It's Donut, but the unicorn's name is Donut, and it's just
I haven't read that one.
Yeah, so that one actually is an interesting one because I almost never submit my work attached to an artist, but in that case, Andrea and I submitted it together.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um,
How
yeah,
did that work,
we
Laura?
have we have the same
break that down? Oh.
Yeah, we have the same agent.
Oh, SE
and
is your agent. Okay.
I had written the text, and then Andrea posted something on her social media of this like very shaggy, chubby unicorn, and I thought, oh my gosh, that is so perfect. And so I reached out to our agent and said, do you know if Andrea has a book that goes with this? And she said, I don't think so. And I said, well, do you want to ask her,
amazing.
if she would be interested in illustrating this? And she was, and I was so excited because she is one of my favorite artists. Her art is just so witty and hilarious. And so
it really is. Yeah, it has a voice all its own. Like that unicorn is just like it's like adorable and hilarious and just like quirky all in one.
And one of the things I love so much that Andrea did with that book is she doesn't show Donut's teeth for like most of the book. You never see Donut's teeth. And then at the very end, when Donut finally flies, there's this big toothy grin, and it's just so powerful. And I mean, she is just a genius. So
hey, you guys,
I was really, really lucky.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Please continue. Sorry, I'm interrupted.
Yeah,
got to manage my
problem.
Visitor.
No problem. No, yes, and I love looking for those details in the text in the illustrations, because like, I mean, we talk on the podcast a lot about illustrators and what they add, and just those tiny little things that like, you don't always see on the first pass. And so it's just so layered with these like brilliant little pieces. And like, I don't always catch that stuff. My kid does though. My 6-year-old kid will be like, oh mama, did you see like there's a whatever on every single page? Or like, go back, like, did you see how this thing changed to this thing? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So
right. And when everyone wants rereadability, you don't want to write a book that people read once and they feel like, okay, great, I'm done. Check that book off the list. And one of the huge factors in rereadability is when there are little interesting things to see in the illustrations. And as authors, we have very limited ability to affect that, but it's just such an amazing thing when you get to create a book with an illustrator who has the brain to sneak all those fun things into every spread. It's so amazing.
Yes. And okay, so can we backtrack just a little and talk about Essie White, your agent?
Actually, Versy Diak is our agent.
Oh,
I understand the confusion. Similar names.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got totally confused. I thought
no worries.
I thought you were repped by Essie. Okay, yeah. So never mind me. Yeah. So let's chat about your agent. Like, how was that journey for you, and how long have you been agented?
Wow. So it's probably been about 10 years now, and I have a lot of friends who have changed agents over the past decade, and I have not. And it's been an incredible partnership for me. I actually got the offer from Versy when I was on vacation, and it was just super amazing. I can still picture the hotel room where I was when I got the offer. And that actually was the beginning of, for years, like every time I was on vacation, I would get good news. And then I thought, I need to go on vacation more for my career.
As if you need more reasons to go on vacation, right?
Right.
Could that be a write-off then, Laura? Can you just write off vacations and be like, look, this is part of my writing career. Like, I need
Seriously, this is how I get my good news, people. Unfortunately, that trend has not continued in the last few years, but I had a good stretch there. So looking back now, I feel like, I knew why I submitted to her, which was because I had read an interview with her where she said she herself had an agent who wasn't responsive and just left her waiting.
Yes.
And that she would never do that to her authors, that was her first priority, was to be really responsive. And I thought, that's what I need, because I am not a patient person.
Same.
And so that has been amazing. She is. I mean, she gets back to me usually within minutes, maybe hours, very rarely days. I have never once been waiting for a week. You know, she is just so fast.
Okay, so
and
quick side note, is she open to queries?
Unfortunately, I don't think so right now. I actually saw an illustrator on Twitter who I really like and who said she had just lost her agent. And I reached out to Versy and said, you know, if you're looking for someone, you know, and she said, no, I can't take on anyone else right now.
If you're going to be that responsive, I mean, you have to draw those lines.
Right, you have to limit,
for
which for sure.
Totally, which I respect because I agree with you. I've talked about this on the podcast a bunch. Like, I cannot handle silence. We write stories for a living. Like, I could write any number of things in that silence. Like, don't make me do that. Just like, and also, give me the answer, fill in the blank, please. Like,
the way every single writer's brain works is if you don't hear anything back, you think they read it and they hated it.
Yes.
And they think I'm a terrible writer and they want to break up with me if they're your agent or if they're your editor. They're regretting ever taking on this.
We're all creating these fictions. Yeah, these fictions.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So she has been amazing in that way. And I was really lucky because what I was starting to say before I interrupted myself with this whole thing was that I really did not do my due diligence. Now I tell my friends when they're considering an agent to always talk to their clients, and that if an agent won't let you talk to any of their clients, that seems problematic to me. I actually had a friend recently who had an offer of rep and the agent said, no, sorry, for privacy, I can't let you talk to any of my clients. And I found that really surprising. Versy will sometimes ask me to talk to someone that she's made an offer to. And I think most agents do.
Totally.
But at any rate, I didn't do that because partly it was, it was 10 years ago. There wasn't such a huge writing community online at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anyone. Like I had very few writing connections. So I didn't have anyone telling me what I should do. And I had, read as much as I could find online, but it definitely wasn't as much as you would find now. So at any rate, I didn't do that. And I'm really lucky that she ended up being such an incredible, not just agent, but also person. I mean, just like the nicest, kindest person where if I, post something on Facebook about how I'm having a rough week, she'll call me from France just to make sure that everything's okay. And she is, incredible human being in addition to being an amazing agent. So I got really lucky. I think everyone who has a successful writing career, there's a lot of luck that goes in there. And I certainly have had more than my fair share of good luck.
And how did you end up, like, what did it look like before you partnered with Versy? Did you query a bunch? Had you been writing a bunch before then, or how did that look?
So I had already sold a couple books on my own and I was querying. I didn't keep track of how many agents I queried, but I had a system that I still think is a good system, which is that I had 10 queries out and every time I got a rejection, I had this list ready to go where I would send another query so that I always had 10 out.
Oh, that's really like juggling. You could just have so many balls in the air at one time.
Right. I just felt like it sort of took the sting out of a rejection if every time one came in, I would already know, okay, here's who I'm sending the next one to. And so definitely it was a process. I don't think it was nearly as long as a process as people go through now. It feels like now it takes much longer and people are waiting, people who are really, really, really great writers. And it's hard.
Do you feel in retrospect, like, and maybe you could explore whether this was intentional on your part. Do you feel like having those couple of books out in the world to sort of prove your mettle, I guess, helped you get Versy or start that relationship or, get in the door with any agents? And did you do that by design?
Yeah, good question. I'm pretty sure, 99% sure the books weren't out yet. They had just been sold. But I don't actually think so, because I think that, and it's the same with selling another book, like your agent has to fall in love with your work. Like they're going to spend so much time on your work. They have to love it. They can't just believe that, yes, this person will sell more books. They have to believe in the specific books that you are going to write, and they are going to have to spend their time selling. And same thing with editors looking, when I submit to an editor, they can see I have this long publishing history, but they have to absolutely love the specific book that we are pitching to them. And if they don't, they're still going to say no. They may think someone's going to publish this book and yay for them, but that it's not the right book for me. And that happens a lot because everyone has different tastes. And if you're going to spend so much time with one writer's work or with one specific book, you have to just be head over heels for it.
We've talked about this same thing. I mean, even referencing the earlier part of the conversation where, some authors really have a brand and you know what you're going to get when you have, say, an Amy Dykman book. I mean, we talked about that with her, with Sarah Lazar, and it's like you say, it doesn't necessarily get you a foot in the door or sell you in the way that like Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise or, any of the famous Chris's, they're like, I know exactly what I'm going to get when I book Chris Pratt. So I'm going to book him on that alone. It's like each piece stands on its own.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's harder. I guess I don't know if it's harder or easier to have multiple things in multiple avenues, because I tend to write sort of like you do, and I have stuff in like every avenue because that's how my brain works also. Like I get kind of bored just hanging out in one space, and then I have an idea that I feel like is much bigger than a picture book, and so I'm like, well, I got to write this out. Well, now I have a middle grade, now I have a chapter book, now I've got this graphic novel, this nonfiction book is like really interesting, so I guess I got to write this thing now, like, so but it keeps me motivated and excited about what I'm doing. And I think you're right too about choosing that agent or that editor, like they say on their end, right? Like they need to fall in love with what you're doing, and that's great. Like it's hard to hear sometimes that they're not totally over the moon for it, and that's rough, but you don't want that. Like, because if they're not, like you're saying, right, like you have to read a picture book how many thousands of times, to like get the edits right. Thousands is maybe too high, but like, to get the edits right and to get it polished the way that it is going to be presented to the world, it takes some time. So if you're not fully committed, it's not going to be the best book that it can be, and you're not going to be happy with the end product. So yeah.
I also think it's an issue for people, like if you have an agent who fell in love with one book, say, and then you want to write something completely different, a lot of agents are not supportive of that. And it can be really tricky because if you're successful in one lane, they want you to stay in that lane and keep selling that type of book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with publishers. I was having a conversation with a friend about a very big name author who he wants to start writing other types of books, but he's been so successful with the books he's producing that his publisher keeps saying no to all these sort of different ideas that he has. They just want what is selling, because he makes up a big part of their revenue. And wow. I am certainly lucky that Airsheet supports all the different directions I want my writing to go in, but I'm also not a big enough sell for any publisher that they say, yeah, we're basically going to fold if you don't keep writing these giant books. So, can you just stay in your lane?
I was going to say, that's like a whole different end of the spectrum issue to have. Like that didn't occur to me. It really
is. I mean, you feel like it's such an enviable position to be in, but in some ways it's not, because you want to be able to write what you want to write, and having a publisher tell you that you can't is going to be frustrating no matter where you are in your career.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think, like, from Brenda's and my perspective. Brenda's got a book that's going to be out in the world within the next 6 months or so.
I saw that. It looks so cute. Congratulations.
We'll take a moment to brag on Brenna. But it's interesting to think, we can be so jealous of these people who make their careers on, like, I'm just going to write wimpy kid books for the rest of my life, or whatever the case is. But But yeah, if you were forced into, you had to write Peep and Egg books for the rest of your career, that would probably get pretty darn stale.
Right, exactly. I mean, everyone has their own issues that they're struggling with, no matter where they are on this path.
I like to think, though, or let's explore this for a moment. Like you really get tired of doing Peep and Egg books, and so you orchestrate a Reichenbach Fall. Are you familiar with the Sherlock Holmes story where Sherlock Holmes dies?
No.
Okay.
No.
Maybe I'm doing a tangent. But I love the reality where like you try and kill off your main characters so that you can explore something else and force your publisher's hand. Of course, in the case of Sherlock Holmes, they revived him and he went on to spend the rest of his career writing Sherlock Holmes stories because that's what the people wanted.
Oh, funny. Yeah, so Peep gets eaten by a fox in book 5, and too bad.
Right.
Oh well.
Sorry, gotta
but
move
now
on.
you've got this fox character that you have to explore, right? So it's like, it breeds this whole next like level.
Right.
The Peepiverse.
Oh,
I have to
nice.
also acknowledge, and sorry for my weird Sherlock Holmes tangent. I talked to Joyce Wan years ago about Peep and Egg and all the rest of her oeuvre before Brenna joined the podcast, and she was a joy to talk to.
Oh yeah, she's great. Yeah. I've had the chance to meet Joyce in person a few times at different festivals. Aww. And yeah, she's definitely a ray of sunshine for sure. Absolutely. Just like her
books
art.
Are too. Yeah.
Aww.
Do you feel like you get a lot of opportunities do you feel like you get a lot of opportunities to work with illustrators in particular?
No, I've met a few over the years, and it's always really fun, but certainly there are more that I haven't met than that I have. And I think more and more I feel like publishers are hiring illustrators who live abroad. So then the chances are even lower that you would meet them in person. Occasionally I've had the chance to have a Zoom with an illustrator, but also definitely more not than the number of times that has happened.
Yeah. I was going to mention Fred Blunt's artwork because his artwork also just seems like adorable and just like a ray of sunshine, as you're saying. And you've worked with him on several of the early readers, right?
Right. He so the one that you were talking about that comes out soon is the 6th one, and I believe
final. You said
I believe final. Yeah, they're now releasing a box set of them, which is really fun.
Oh, cute.
And I think that series has reached its conclusion. But
the main
it has
characters
been such a joy seeing Fred's
Yeah.
art for each. Yeah, right. That's not technically in the books, but I'm just going to publish a little short story online about
You're just gonna
all of the
Rowling
dark fates that befall them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, amazing. How does that work as an author? Like if they're making like a box set of it, so do they tell you and then you're aware of it and then there's like a whole nother like reprinting of stuff and like how does that work? Like I have no idea. I'm not anywhere near, that in my career.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. They just say, hey, we're making a box set, or hey, we're turning this into a board book, and you just say, oh, that's great. Or if a book goes into paperback, they just tell you, or not that rarely, they forget to tell you. I mean, the amount of stuff that happens and the author discovers it by someone tagging them on social media, or authors are known for Googling themselves and they discover, oh, wow, this is online and I had no idea. So publishers don't always let authors in on what's happening with their books. This is definitely a known thing.
It's an alarming reminder of just how out of our control so much the process is, and how not our own work, our work becomes once it hits a certain level.
Yeah, that is very, very true. Yeah. It does. Publishing in general is kind of like a black box where you never really know what's going on. And that is true at every step along the way, including once a book has been published. You don't necessarily know the foreign rights have been sold until long after the fact. You might see the book cover in a different language before you ever hear about it officially. There is a lot of mystery and smoke around everything, and that does make it so hard for all creators, I think.
It's time for this week's book reviews. From Jon. Jon's review this week is for Donuts for Everybody by the one and only Jerrold Connors. Yes, we have reviewed this book in the past, and yes, it's still creative gold. So we're dropping another review to pay homage to all of the amazing work Jerrold did to bring a little sweetness into everybody's lives during a not-so-sweet point in time. And even though it's quite hard to get copies these days, it's worth noting that this book did leave a small void in the world, maybe waiting for a sequel or a series. Jerrold, please, more donuts. 10 boxes out of 10, Timbits out of 10, eh? From Josh. Josh's review is for Hana Abacado's My Mama is a Work of Art. What a great way to introduce the emotional connection many people feel about their tattoos. This normalizes body art in a way that we rarely see in picture books, despite tattoos being nearly ubiquitous today. The perspective of the main character comes from a place of acceptance and love as he thinks about all of the beautiful memories and meanings held on his mama's skin. A totally endearing and accessible look at something rarely seen but worth exploring for little audiences. And my review for this week is This Book is Definitely Not Cursed, written by Megan Woodward and illustrated by Risa Rodil. Looking for a book that is like Monster at the End of the Book vibes but cursed? A book filled with mischievous trickery and an unreliable narrator? A book that may or may not give you nose noodles for life? Just kidding, that definitely doesn't happen in this book. But what does happen is a laugh-out-loud good time combined with charmingly evil illustrations. Don't forget to get your own reviews and library requests in. It's the #1 way to help an author's sales. Love the podcast and want to help support more great episodes like this one? Check out our Patreon, grab some cool podcast swag, give a shout out to someone amazing in the Kidlit world, or review and share an episode with friends. And now, back to our show.
Yeah, and it seems like, it feels like a missed opportunity, like not to hire people like specifically for these jobs. Like I don't know what that job would be called, like author liaison or something. Like just tell this one point person like all the stuff that's happening with my stuff and make sure like the information gets passed, right? Like there's like an obvious hole there where it's like either they forget or it's not important, or my general theory is that they just don't have time, right? They don't have time to, like,
I think that's what it is.
But like somebody should, right? Like hire that guy, hire that virtual assistant to just be like, hey, guess what? Like,
I think the opposite is happening in that people are getting fired from publishers of all sizes, not because they're not amazing, but just because there's fewer and fewer resources, which is then making everyone who does still have a job stretched even thinner. So you have these awesome editors and you have these awesome marketing and publicity people, but they're having to cover more and more books and more tasks. And yeah, the fact that things slip through the cracks in terms of connecting with authors is absolutely inevitable. And I think there just isn't the money is my understanding.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. I want to ask about your academic background a little bit and how that plays into the way that you think about writing and writing science. Do you see any interplay? And I want to brag on you for a minute because you search for Laura Gehl on Google, and then Google tells you, oh, you mean Dr. Laura Gehl.
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, so I have a PhD in neuroscience, and I do think
Wow.
It does interplay with my writing in a lot of ways. I mean, partly the biggest way is just that's how I got started writing in the first place. So I was working in a science lab. I had one son and another on the way, and I knew that I couldn't work full-time in a lab and be at home with my kids as much as I wanted to. And so I started doing science writing, and I was writing at the beginning, I was writing maybe half for kids, half for adults. So I was doing some like really heavy academic type writing where I would take new research and try to make it digestible for people who either weren't scientists or who weren't scientists in that specific area, depending on the job. And then I was also doing science writing for kids for different magazines, and I ended up doing some editing in that area. So that was sort of my very first entree into writing in general and writing for kids, and that gradually led to the career I have now. But in terms of how my academic background affects my work still, like, one of the biggest things is just having that scientific curiosity. Like, I love reading about science and new things that are going on in science. And so that inspires a bunch of my work. Like Apple and Magnolia, I wrote after I read about how trees are communicating with each other, which was brand new science at the time. Now so much more has come out about it. But when I wrote that book many years ago, it was just the very, very beginning of scientists discovering that. And it blew my mind, and I knew it was going to blow everyone's mind. And so figuring out how to put that into a picture book was tricky. And I ended up with a very fictional story that was only loosely inspired by that science. But still, I get a lot of my ideas from science. And then another thing that I have retained from my brief time being a scientist is just how accessible scientists are. You know, scientists are so excited to talk to you about their work. And so if I want to put scientists into a book, which I have now done twice, I know that there are lots of scientists who are going to be super excited about that. And I have no qualms whatsoever about reaching out to scientists and saying, hey, you know, I'm writing a book. This is my purpose. Are you interested in being involved? And so I did that first with a book called Who is a Scientist, where I wanted to show all the diversity that exists in the world of scientists in every possible way. And then I did it more recently in a middle grade book called Climate Warriors, which is about scientists approaching the problem of climate change in many, many different ways from different fields, even like economics and psychology, in addition to the harder sciences. And so I think feeling free to just find people's email addresses on their university web pages and just emailing them is something that is a holdover from that time when I was one of those people. And I tell kids that. I say, these email addresses are available and you can reach out to these scientists and ask them questions, and they are going to be psyched to talk to you. And I believe that to be true. But if I hadn't been in that world, I probably would have been really intimidated, which I think a lot of people are.
You can never really understand how jazzed about their work scientists are until you kind of live in that world and you understand, like, they're enthused about doing what they're doing, and it's almost a gift to ask of them, you know, chances to help share that with the world, because that's why they do what they do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
I feel like the higher up the chain you go, too, the more excited they are, right? Because, like, you're not going to get a PhD in neuroscience if you're not truly psyched on neuroscience, right? Because, like, I mean, when you get to that point, I mean, that's your life, right? Like, that's all you're doing. Like, you're entrenched in, like, that stuff. So if you're not, it's kind of like agents and editors. Like, if you're not really excited about this manuscript, like, you better get off the project, because, like, you got to be, like, you really have to be invested and just all or nothing. So yeah,
for sure.
Do you mostly tend towards science, like nature and science in your books, Laura, or is it sort of like a mix?
Yeah, I do feel like that's the way it's been leaning, and that is probably because I mostly write picture books, and animals and nature are very accessible for young readers. It's funny because I have a critique partner who wrote a book about the brain, Stacey McAnulty, and it's great, but I've never managed to think of a way that I can write a compelling book about the brain, even though that is, in theory, what I know the most about. But I grew up with a dad who was really into, you know, we were always going for nature walks and hikes, and he was really into bird watching. And I think that's just a huge part of my soul and my DNA. And so sharing that love of nature with kids is definitely a big part of my mission. So I will read about really cool science that is more technical, and sometimes I will think about, is there a good way to present this for kids? But more often than not, I myself can't figure it out. I mean, there are books for kids about, nanotechnology and quarks and what have you. And I think some of those books are really well done. Some really are just appealing to people who think it's funny to buy a baby a book about this obscure topic, and really they're not age appropriate at all for the
Whatever
kid.
sells them, though,
So,
I guess.
it's a mix. Yeah, seriously, I was listening to one of your podcasts with, I think it was Laurel Snyder, who was talking about doing things for art and doing things for money. And yeah, if you're going to do this full time, you have to do what will sell. And so if someone said, I'll pay you to write a book about quarks, of course I would do it. But more nature and animals for sure for me.
Peep and Egg explore nanotechnology.
Right.
Judge Juliet rules on the ethics of cloning or something.
Of AI, yeah. Well, but honestly, that's how I ended up writing Climate Warriors, even though I really did not want to write middle grade, was because I just couldn't write about what I wanted to write about in a picture book form. And so I had to go into middle grade for that one.
Interesting.
And it was like a non-negotiable for you. Like, this is something that you really wanted to explore in book form in some format.
I really wanted to do it. And there just wasn't any way to do what I wanted to do, which was talk about all these different pathways science is taking to attack the problem. There just was no way to do that as a picture book. But it was not in my comfort zone. And the reason for that isn't because I'm not comfortable with writing long swaths of words. I'm fine with that. But what I love about the work I usually do is the interplay of the words and the pictures. And in middle grade, you just don't have that in the same way. The words are really carrying the book. And that's just not how I prefer to work. So I very well might write another middle grade nonfiction on another topic I'm passionate about. I have some proposals I've been working on, but I think the bulk of my work will always be for younger kids, just because I really love how the illustration carries half of the load.
Did you sell Climate Warriors on proposal, or had you already written it?
I did. Yeah. No, I sold it on proposal, which is typical for middle grade.
Middle grade nonfiction, I presume.
Middle grade nonfiction. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, right. So would you ever consider writing a middle grade fiction? I feel like probably not, because that would be kind of like, I feel like for you, it's sort of like, what's the point? Because there are no pictures and then it's fiction. So it's sort of like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I think I would be more likely to try to write a middle grade graphic novel than to write a middle grade novel. But I mean, never say never, right? If I come up with some compelling idea and I think this is the book that I need to write right now, I would never say this is off the table. But I think it's unlikely.
The publisher needs to come back and say, we're gonna fold unless you write this middle grade.
Right.
Right, we need this.
And that's also a big part of it is you write a novel, you have no idea if anyone is going to publish it. And I do have friends who can sell middle grade fiction on proposal because they've written a bunch of middle grade novels already, sure. But for me, they would want to see the whole novel, and the idea of writing a whole novel and then having someone say, yeah, I don't think so, over and over and over, that is a daunting thing. And
it's hard. Yeah, it's really hard to like break a whole novel and then send it out and be like, oh my gosh, like I did all this work and it's not going anywhere. Like I wish, it's a thing. I mean, for some people, like you're saying, like if you sell a bunch of middle grade already, then you could possibly sell on proposal, which feels a lot kinder. Like, here's my idea. I just wrote a little bit. Like, what do you think? Will you buy it if I write it? Like, are you going to be on the other end for me? Or like, is it just going to be like all this work?
But, I have a friend who now can do that, but she probably wrote, I don't know, at least a handful of novels that never sold before her first one sold. And now she's had several sell and she can sell something on proposal, but you've got to put in that time for most people. There are people whose first novel sells, but it's more likely not to happen.
It's a nightmare.
So that is a lot to take on.
It's there's an interesting dichotomy, and maybe this is just my mental comparison with you being someone who has a science background. There's an interesting reality there where for scientists, regardless of discipline, so much of science happens after a proposal is accepted. I don't want to conduct a study believing in the hypothesis myself without someone also believing in, like, this is worth investing in. Like, I believe the hypothesis that this is going to produce great results. The reverse almost needs to be true, I guess, for you with something that's like a larger undertaking. Somebody else needs to believe in it as well before you take that on.
Right. And just like you were saying about science, like, people need to get funding in science, and you have to, submit a grant proposal or what have you, and people have to believe in your work in order to give you money. And just like we were saying, you have to publish what people are going to be willing to give you money for. That's true in science too. There are scientists who would love to go off in this direction or that direction, but they can't get funding for it. And so I guess it's somewhat comforting to know that it's not just in our very bananas kidlit world that money is always going to be a reality. Publishers are businesses. So that's always going to be part of the equation.
Yeah, no, totally. And so Laura, I mean, we're like into the conversation, but let's talk about the 3 books that you have coming out. Cause I mean, I want to make sure that people know about them and to look for them. And it's amazing that you've got so many coming out just this year. Well, end of this year and into next, but
Yeah. So I have, like we said, Frog Can Hop is the last early reader in the series, which is coming out December 12th, maybe. Oh my gosh, that's
next week as of this recording.
So that's very exciting. And then looking ahead into next year, I have a Lift the Flap book, which is coming out. And that's the second one that I've done with Laura, and they're nature-based. So this one is called Who Laid These Eggs? And what really drew me to this topic, and it's funny because it actually does go back to Peep and Egg, is how many different animals lay eggs and what they look like. Because we think of, and this is the reason I say it goes back to Peep and Egg, is way back when I was doing school visits for Peep and Egg, one of the things I did was I would show kids different, like these big blown up pictures of different types of eggs and see if they could guess. And some of them would be bird eggs, but I also had like stink bug eggs, which are really cool, and salmon eggs and snake eggs. And so that was in my head. And so this Lift the Flap book has different types of eggs, and you try to guess and then you lift the flap. And so it's super fun, and I'm really excited about that one. And then in the spring, I have a new picture book coming out with Patricia Matola, who illustrated Apple and Magnolia, and it's called Saving Delicia. And again, it's a fictional story with a scientific element. And in this case, it's seed banks, which is something that I think are so amazing and have really wanted to share with kids. I actually wrote another book about seed banks that's more straight nonfiction. That one, as of now, hasn't sold. I still really love it, so we'll see. But this one did sell, and I love Patricia's art so much, and so I'm thrilled to get to do another book with her.
I was just sort of familiarizing myself with the arcs that you had sent before we jumped on, and I just it's like so. Like, her artwork is lyrical, if that's a word to describe art. Like, it's just so beautiful.
It is. It is lyrical.
And I don't know, it's very it's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about Andrea and her art earlier, and her art is joyful in one way, and Patricia's is joyful in just the absolutely most different way, but both of them just bring so much to every book they're a part of. And so I'm really excited for that book. And I actually just, looking further ahead into the year, this week I came home. I was on a trip out west where it was really snowy. There's no snow here in Maryland. And I came home and there was a package, and it was an arc for a book called Snow Is that comes out later in 2024. So it
wow.
felt very relevant. And that book is just sort of a joyous ode to snow, with a family just showing the family going through one really snowy day. So that'll also be out next year.
So that's four books in the next year.
Yes.
Well, one comes out December. So technically 3 books next year. But yes. And then are you saying there's another one though coming?
Yeah, I also have a Jewish book coming out called Robot Shabbat that comes out next year. No pub date yet for that one, awesome. But it's set in the future with flying, kind of Jetsons like. Did
you comp to Jetsons when you subbed it? I hope that you did.
Oh no,
missed
I
opportunity.
did not.
I mean, it got bought, so I guess we're okay. But
yeah, but that's definitely the vibe of the book, and so that one also comes out.
So I mean, just logistically speaking, like, I mean, that's incredible. Like, congratulations on all of that success. That's amazing. But like, logistically, how are you juggling all that? Like, do you still, because okay, so my book is coming out May 1st, and like, it's my debut book. Like, I'm excited. I'm telling everybody. I'm, and like being a part of like all this stuff, like blogs and other podcasts, and just like saying yes to all of the opportunities to like get my book in front of people and like shove it in their eyeballs so they can like look at it, right? But for you, like, you've been writing for a long time. People know your name, they know your books. Like, are you still trying to do that much with each book? Because if you are, like, how are you doing that, right? Like, what are the logistics of 4 books coming out?
Definitely, absolutely not. Okay. No. I think one of the gifts that comes with doing this for a long time is you realize how little effect you can have on your book sales. And it can be discouraging, but it can also be so freeing, because you realize I could do every single thing in my power. I could spend every single minute publicizing this book, and it really wouldn't make a difference. Maybe I could personally move like 1,000 copies. That's nothing.
With a lot of hustle.
Right.
Right, with so much hustle. And so I do what I can. I love doing book festivals. When people invite me to be on their blog or their podcast, I always say yes, but I don't seek out opportunities the way that I used to. And I definitely have whatever is the opposite of FOMO. When people are talking about, oh, I'm doing this or that or the other thing, and I'm not doing it, I think, yay, I'm going to be at home writing the next book or reading by the fire.
You feel freedom to miss out.
Yeah.
I actually went to a talk many years ago by Kwame Alexander. This was, honestly, he wasn't that famous yet at the time, but he was talking about always say yes. And so I told my husband about that talk, and I did try to follow it for a while. And then when I started thinking, I don't think I want to follow this anymore, he would still quote it at me, always say yes. But no, now I can't always say yes. I can say yes to things that are not going to take up too much time, but there are bigger things that I can't say yes to and still preserve my writing time and my sanity. And I don't feel bad about that at all.
I've heard people say too, I can't pin this quote to anybody specific, but I've heard it said, like, the only thing that can sell your next book is you writing that next book. Like, that's the thing that's going to sell books, is like more writing. Right. So like, yeah, I agree. 'Cause I feel like I'm already, I haven't even really participated in that many things yet, but I'm already like, oh gosh, my calendar's like filling up with like this thing and that thing.
So
and I got to write this blog for that. And then, and I'm part of a debut group, and I'm part of this. And then and I'm still trying to do the podcast, and I'm trying to, finish up a middle grade novel. And I'm trying, like, I still am trying to write, but it's like this book has sort of like taken over, a lot of like the free time, and it's like creeping into the crevices, which I'm excited, and it's my debut and I love this book. So like
what a problem
and
for
you
Brenna.
should celebrate.
I know, but like I do recognize that it has become, it already is going to take up, some time that,
And I think, you said two very important words. I'm excited is what you said. If you're excited to do all those things, then that's amazing. And you should absolutely do them because you do want to celebrate this book and you want to tell everyone about it. And that's great. You're not doing it because you feel like you have to. You're doing it because you're excited. But, in 5 years, if you have a book that's coming out and you think, I don't want to do all of that stuff, then it's good to know that you don't have to, because honestly, it's just not going to make that much difference to the book's success. And so it's good to just have the option. I really enjoy book festivals, so I'll probably always do that. There are other things I enjoy less. Like I get very stressed out by bookstore visits. So I used to reach out to bookstores and try to arrange them, and I would do so many of them. And now when a bookstore asks me to come, I say yes, and I'm really honored that they want me to come, but I don't reach out to them because I do find it really stressful because you just have no idea. Sometimes too many people will show up and not be able to fit, which is a great problem to have. And much more often, not enough people show up, which is a problem that happens all the time and that we should talk about more, because every author feels terrible when it happens to them, but it happens to everyone. And then the problem in between is you have a bunch of babies and then you have a bunch of teenagers, and what is the best way to present to such a diverse audience? This just happened to me recently, and you kind of have to be ready on your toes to deal with whoever happens to come through the door. So it's compared to a school visit where you're presenting to first graders at 10 a.m. and second graders at 11 a.m. Like school visits are another thing I love because I love interacting with kids and I love knowing exactly the age of kids so I can plan my presentation. Bookstore visits just are so much more stressful because you have no idea what you're going to be dealing with.
It's like an improv show versus
stand-up. I definitely right. I definitely say yes when people invite me because it's so great that they think of me and that they want to stock my books, but I don't personally try to arrange it anymore. That's something that I've realized about myself, that it adds a lot of stress to my life. Every time I have one of those on the calendar, I kind of dread it all week. And then when it happens, it's always really fun. But it's a huge source of anxiety that I at least don't need to invite as much as I used to into my routine.
And this is not, this is kind of off topic entirely, but I feel like that's sort of you've pinpointed exactly the difference between, choosing to self-publish and choosing to go the traditional publishing route, right? Because if you are into marketing your book and getting out there and you love to interact and book visits and, school visits and all the stuff, that's great. And maybe you'll probably thrive, because if you're out there doing all that work and hustling, you'll probably sell a ton of books. But if you go the traditional route, you're hoping, like when you sign with an agent, it's your agent's job to find the places to sub to and sell the book, right? That's their job. You no longer have to look at Publishers Weekly and Query Tracker and focus on who's selling what and where and whatever. You don't have to do that, which is amazing. It frees up your brain space. Same with going with a traditional publisher. Now that's their job. They sell the book, right? As an author, I feel you shouldn't have to take all of that up in your brain. That's something that should, theoretically, be taken off your plate a little. Do what you want, do what you think is fun and what is, joyful for you to do. And it, is going to excite you. But beyond that, it's nice to have that publisher that's all right, we've got the money to put into the marketing. We're going to make sure it gets to this place and this place and this place. Because like you said, they're the ones who are going to move the needle. So.
Right. And people get frustrated because publishers don't do as much as they were expecting or don't do enough. And that is always going to be something that stresses people out, regardless, honestly, of the level that they're at. Because I have friends who are much, much bigger names than me, and they get frustrated because their publishers aren't doing X, Y, and Z, but their publishers are doing A, B, and C, which a lot of other people would be so grateful for. But it's, people always want their publisher to be doing more. And you have limited control over that. But yeah, the smallest action by a publisher often makes more of a difference than all the actions that a writer can take.
And then you can pick and choose what slack you want to pick up as an author and like slide in. Anyways, sorry, Josh.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about how much you feel at this point in your career you're able to get on the same page with your publisher about that sort of thing either before the book is sold or during the negotiation and editing process. Do you feel like you have a sense for, the flat book? You feel like you know where that's going to end up and how that's going to be marketed and all that, as an example?
Yeah, honestly, there are people who really get into the weeds on that, and I am not one of them. I know I work with a lot of different publishers. I kind of know their MO, often smaller publishers will do more, not always. It really varies a lot, but if a book gets multiple offers, they'll often tell you, here's our marketing plan. And so you can kind of weigh that into your decision. But marketing plans tend to be pretty generic. Like what they say will be pretty similar to what everybody says in general. And I myself tend to not worry about that or ask about that, largely because they're going to do what they're going to do. I have a friend who really, really fights with her publisher a lot, and over like, what are you doing? You said you're going to do this. You haven't done that. The fact is, they end up doing what they're going to do. Like they very rarely are influenced at all by any of those conversations. I will say there is some extent, and it differs by publisher, and it also differs just sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. But there are times when there can be a synergy between what the author is doing and what the publisher will do. Like for Peep and Egg, we created a book trailer, but then they showed it at the Bologna Book Festival on this big screen in their booth. And that is something we couldn't have didn't predict, but we're really grateful for. And it was amazing. And so if we hadn't made that book trailer, that wouldn't have happened. But, I made book trailers for other books back in the day when book trailers were more of a thing and never had that kind of buy-in from publishers. So, sometimes if you just let your publisher know what you are doing, they will assist. I heard of another campaign where an author bought a little gift to be given out with pre-ordered copies of the book and sent them to the publisher, and then the publisher would send them out. So the publisher kind of helped out a little with that pre-order campaign, but the author, who is a big name, was the one actually purchasing these items. Yeah. So, in that case, again, if she hadn't been doing that, the publisher wouldn't have been doing their part. So sometimes the publishers will get on board, and often if you create an educator's guide, they will be willing to put it on their website, things like that. So the efforts can dovetail to some extent, and it really varies how much.
Yeah, corporations will usually be happy to capitalize on work that is done that they don't have to invest in on their end.
Right. But as a bigger entity, sometimes they can magnify the effects of the work.
Absolutely.
The unpaid work that you are putting in.
Unpaid by them, at least. I was waiting for a window to bring this up organically in the conversation, but now's as good a time as any. So what you see behind me is a little marker drawn turkey from Thanksgiving. We're recording this just for posterity during Thanksgiving. I wanted to call out. That's my daughter Juliet. And so Judge Juliet has a proud place on our bookshelf, especially because you spelled it in your book the same way that we spell it for our daughter's name. So I don't. She is not. She doesn't identify with the subject matter necessarily, although it's a very entertaining book. But I just wanted to let you know that has a special place in our household, just because of the namesake.
Fun. Yeah,
Sweet.
I love hearing from kids with the various names in my books. That happens a lot. I'll meet people at book festivals who say, "This is my daughter Britta," or "This is our daughter May," or whatever. Yeah. That's always so fun. Yeah, I haven't put any of my own kids' names in any books, and so I really love hearing from parents who have kids with the names I've chosen.
Are they bothered by that, your kids?
No, I've dedicated books to them, and
be satisfied.
I don't think it's ever occurred to them, honestly. No, none of them has ever asked to have their name in a book. If they did, I probably would put them in.
Do they? Because we asked Tara Lazar and also Pat Zietlow Miller, and they both had complete opposite answers to this. But do your kids get excited about the fact that you are an author and are very well published, or are they sort of like whatever, or like don't care?
I think they pretty much take it for granted because it has been this way since they were little. So that's just what I do. My daughter loves reading every new book every time an arc comes. She gets so excited. Whereas my sons have not read my last many books. And they are older, so that might be part of it. But she's a real book lover. She's on the Book Wars team at her school, which I will just say, because I love this irony, she was the one who had trouble learning how to read, and is why I started writing early readers when I had that experience, because my boys just learned how to read effortlessly. And then suddenly my daughter had so much trouble, and oh my gosh, we got every early reader from the library. I bought so many early readers that the library didn't have, and that really gave me a sense of which ones actually helped. And it may be that for some kids it's different than for my daughter, but I actually think that there are certain things that are always helpful and certain things that are not helpful. And so that was how I started writing early readers. And now she's such a big reader. She loves reading. She's always reading. And so I try to always get that story out there for parents who may be struggling with the same thing, that just because your child can't learn to read effortlessly, maybe it takes many years, does not mean they're not going to end up as a lifelong reader, because I think she will be for sure.
Did they get to her in time for them to help her learn to read? Maybe the manuscripts, but probably not the final product.
Oh, no. She was a very fluent reader long before I ever sold one.
That darn publication
inspiration.
Process. I know, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask one more question.
Go ahead. Okay.
I'm sorry, because I know we're right at the hour. Yeah. On those early readers, there's something that we've talked about in the past. On those early readers, it's interesting that they had such a personal connection for you. We've talked to other people about how it's hard to sell early readers that aren't IP based or based on some other character. Did you find it challenging to sell those? Did you sell them also as a series?
Good question.
So yeah, it is a good question. I had only written the first one, I think, and I can't remember if we pitched it as a possible series or not. I do often pitch things as possible series, though, and I recommend that to people when they're writing board books or early readers, to write the first one, but then show that you have the vision for the series. And in your pitch, you can talk a little bit about, if you wanted this to be a series, this is what it could look like. So it'll often say in my pitches, this could be a standalone book or the first in a series, and then a little bit about the vision for the series. So I can't remember if we did that for the first one, which was called Cat Has a Plan, but I definitely have done that for other series.
And then were you able to, just to circle back to Josh's question, did you sell, was it like an IP, like Josh was saying, or were you like, I have this idea for an early reader and then we know where to sub it? Because you're right, it usually comes the other way around, like top down, like, hey, we're looking for blah, blah, blah.
Right. No, we just sold it, and I don't recall it being particularly difficult, but I will say that I've written a lot of other early readers and haven't ever sold any other early readers. So I do think it's a very difficult market, and I do think there are a lot of books around, Thomas the Tank Engine, or
it's a very different
my
type of
points of
competitive.
reference are probably all out of date. But yeah, I think it can be hard to compete with the character, the licensed characters, for sure.
Like, because so a picture book is already like very minimal words, right? So that's already really difficult. And then you go one further and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to do a picture book, but sparse words, right? Like that's more difficult because it your words are very much like carrying everything. They have to be very, very, exactly what you want. And so then to whittle it down even further to an early reader, right? Because these are all very just like simple words, simple plot, just like, and remind me the name of it. I'm sorry. Frog hops. Frog can hop. I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
So, but I mean, it's such a simple concept, and it's done so well. But to do it well and so simply is difficult. It's really hard. Like you make it look
threading
easy,
a needle,
but we know being on the other end, like it's not. It's really difficult. And so you're right, to break into that market is hard. It's really hard to like thread that needle and make it fun and like
It really. Yeah, it's like a puzzle for sure. You have all these rules of, in the case of the ones I was writing, a lot of the words have to be in the same word family, and you have to have short sentences and this and this and this. And actually my teenager one time was trying to write one. He thought that it would be easy, and every time he tried, I said, "Oh no, you broke that rule." And "Oh no, you broke that." And he was amazed by how hard it is to like, even if something rhymes, it might not be in the same word family. And so he was getting tripped up by all these different things that go into every one of those books. And so, yeah, it is really hard, but it's fun in this, the same kind of reason that people like Sudoku or crossword puzzles. You have to make everything fit. And I really enjoy trying to think about them.
Totally,
I like the special teachable moment that you had with your teenager, where it was an opportunity for him to learn, like, yes, what mom does is not as easy as you might think it is.
I was gonna say, like, how satisfying was that? Like see, like it's actually really hard, like,
Right.
Well, Laura, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. We're up and over the hour, so I don't want to take any more of your time, but this has been, so insightful and just a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on to chat with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It was really fun. The hour just flew by, and I really enjoy listening to the show. So I hope that what I said is useful to some of your other listeners.
And thank you so much for listening. I love when people tell us that they listen, because we don't know.
Even if you don't, actually, sure. We appreciate being told that.
Yeah, just saying it. Just let us know. Thanks for listening this week.
Find all of our episodes and other associated links and information at linktree.com/verseshow.
Or reach out to us on Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see you next verse.
Bye.